Hey, what's up, guys? Okay, so chapter 141 of Eden Zero is out, and there honestly isn't really much to talk about when it comes to this week's chapter, because this was literally just a setup chapter for what's going to be happening in the next chapter, because according to the leaks, chapter 142 is going to be the big chapter where we get the beginning of the fight between Shiki and Shura. Even though we do get a little bit of it in this chapter, it seems like 142 is really going to be the start of the actual fight. So, like I said, there's not really much to talk about because this was literally just setting up that chapter. But there are some things that we can dive into, so let's jump right into it. Okay, so we start the chapter where the last one left off with the Eden Zero ship breaking through the planet and getting into the atmosphere, and we end up finding out, which I don't think we ever heard this before this chapter, but apparently the planet that Shura is hiding out on is actually called the Planet of Ash, where basically the entire planet is covered in ash, except for one domed city, which kind of makes me wonder what's going on with the planets in the outer cosmos, because there seem to be covered in some kind of natural disaster or some kind of like natural element. Like Foresto was obviously mostly forests. We had that mud world that we briefly went to. There's Red Cave, which I believe was part of the outer cosmos, which originally was a planet of fire, now mostly underwater. And then obviously there's the planet we just came from, Planet Sandra, which was mostly just desert with one single city in the mix. So what's going on with the planets on the outer cosmos? Why is pretty much every planet that Poseidon Arrow rules over just one single city with the entire rest of the planet wrecked? Like, I think the only planet that we've been to so far, or we've seen so far in the cosmos, that isn't just one single city and the entire planet is just nothing but ruin, was the Poseidon Arrow 1 planet. And we don't even know that for sure because we only really saw that one city. Anyway, getting back to the chapter, we actually have the team coming up with a plan as to how they're going to make their way into the city. So basically, because of the fact that there's a dome around the city, they know that they can't really just fly up to it. So their options are mostly to break into it. But unlike what happened with Dragon Joe, if they try to break their way in, there's already armed forces waiting at the entrance for them to kind of like do that. So if they were to try to do that, they're immediately going to be outnumbered. So instead, they actually come up with a plan of breaking off into two teams. One team's going to stay on the Eden Zero ship and try to lead all the people away from them, while the other team goes from underground and digs their way into the city. And you know what? This is actually a very smart plan for them to come up with, even though they don't know already that they've been caught entering the planet. Because now that we know from the last chapter that they actually have been caught on camera by Shura, by entering the planet, basically they could have the main ship pretend like it's trying to find a way to get inside the city while being chased around by other ships, and then the ground forces can actually sneak their way in without being detected. And now that we know that they're going to be breaking up into two separate teams, it makes me wonder what's going to be the roster for those two teams. Obviously, Shiki would have been on the ground team if what happened at the end of the chapter didn't actually end up happening. So now that we know that happened, and we know that Shiki can't be part of that team, it does make me wonder who's going to be on that roster now. And if I had to guess, I would say that the roster for the ground team that's going to be digging their way underground to make their way into the city is going to be obviously Rebecca, Homura, Wise, Laguna, because he actually had a big part to play if my theory about the whole princess thing is accurate. And then Jin. And then the other team that's going to be staying on the ship, and also Happy and Pino for some reason, because, obviously they're going to be with them on the ground. But the other team that's going to be staying on the ship is obviously going to be Witch, Hermit, Sister, and Klein. And the only reason why I think that Klein's going to stay on the ship is because Jin will probably advocate for her to stay where she's most safe and not want her to be put into any danger. So he would try to make her, or try to force her to stay on the ship, which could actually lead to a pretty interesting fight scene if we actually do get to see someone break onto the ship, like I think is going to end up happening because of the fact that, well, Couchwell's there, and she kind of already foreshadowed that she's going to be fighting somebody in this chapter in order to protect the kitchen. And you know what, speaking of Couchwell, I really hope Hero finds a way to make her useful for the team, because I do like the idea of her being Rebecca's VCuber mentor and teaching her how to be a professional VCuber, because I do like that aspect of Rebecca's story, like her trying to aspire to be a professional VCuber. I do want to see more of that being interplayed into the main story, but other than that, she doesn't have a use for the team. She's kind of just sitting there being dead weight. And there's actually this really nice moment with Shiki after they come up with a plan, where he actually kind of reaffirms to Hermit, Sister, Witch, and Pino and Happy that yes, he is definitely going to destroy the All-Link system, because he knows that if he doesn't manage to destroy it, then every robot in the entire Outcosmos, including them, will die. So it kind of goes to show exactly how much of a strong leader Shiki is, because with those words alone, you kind of feel that everyone is reassured that yeah, they're going to manage to get this done. And then immediately after that, we had to find out that Shura pulled another Darth Vader by basically stopping the ship in its tracks by using his gravity ether gear. And this is when we actually get the moment where Shiki decides that he's going to go out and fight off against Shura alone, which Hermit immediately tries to dissuade him from doing, because she says that Shura's powers are actually 4 times stronger than she originally thought they were. So she doesn't think that Shiki would actually stand a chance of fighting against him. And then in another moment where, with his words alone, he reassures everyone that he can handle this job. he tells him, "Don't worry, I got this." And then immediately goes crashing down to the planet. And then we finally, after having over 20 chapters of build-up, have Shiki and Shura coming face to face, which is the beginning of their fight. And before I get into that, I do want to mention again, which kind of confused me because I was so convinced it actually did happen at some point. But apparently Shura really doesn't know anything about Shiki. And apparently Orc, Brittany, and Mora, despite, having dealt with Shiki like a long time ago, they were never able to tell Shura, hey, there's another kid who's related to Ziggy who has gravity for gear. They never gave him a warning to that. So that's actually kind of interesting why they wouldn't have told him about this ahead of time. But anyway, we had a fight starting off between the two of them, which actually kind of reminds me a lot of the fight between Natsu and Gajeel from Fairy Tail, because it's kind of like the same aspect. We have two characters who have similar powers fighting off against each other. And in the beginning of the fight, it actually does kind of look like Hermit was right about Shura being way too strong for Shiki, because we see Shiki very easily being pushed back by Shura. And then out of nowhere, literally from one panel to the next, like nothing, like there was no transition. We have one panel where Shura is pushing back Shiki, and then in the very next page, we have Shura in the sky, just basically flying up by himself, wondering what the fuck just happened. And we end up finding out that Shiki actually managed to throw him up in the air very easily, and then flies up behind him and punches him back down to the ground, landing a really crucial hit on Shura, making him bleed from his mouth. So it does go to show that, as Herman actually points out at the end of the chapter, Shiki as well is a lot stronger than Herman originally thought. So this is going to be a much more even fight than we all originally thought it would be. But anyway guys, that's it for this week's chapter. I'm actually really excited to see what happens in the next week's chapter because, like I said in the beginning of the video, according to the leaks, chapter 142 is going to be mostly focusing on the fight between Shiki and Shura, at least according to the title of the chapter. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'm actually very excited that we're actually skipping right ahead to that fight, because I was really worried that we would actually have Shura fighting off against the Eraser before he fights off against Shiki, and then that would kind of devalue Shiki's win against him. But since we have Shiki starting off the fight against Shura already, that kind of basically gets rid of all my fears for that. I'm really hoping that Hero does this fight justice by making it go through multiple chapters, not just the next chapter. And I'm actually looking forward to seeing what happens with the ground team that's going to be breaking into the city. Because obviously they're going to be fighting off against the Ocean 6 members, but I'm wondering which people are going to be fighting off against which members. The only person I'm not questioning about who he's going to be fighting is Laguna, because I'm almost certain that if my theory is correct about Princess being Ijuna, then obviously Laguna's going to be fighting off against her as a way to kind of bridge that connection between the two of them as being former members of the Oasis group. But anyway guys, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, drop me a like, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. Comment down below your thoughts and theories for the chapter, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.